Good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Moore, a member of the OMTech Advisory Board, and I'm happy to welcome you to this session and introduce our speakers. Welcome to the panel discussion, Important Trends Shaping the Future of Additive Manufacturing. This session brings together diverse perspectives, including OEMs and machine companies, as well as metal and bioprinting expertise. Our moderator is Trey Rogers, a research principal engineer in the Advanced Technologies Group at Zimmer Biomet. He provides research, material manufacturing, design, regulatory, and marketing support for multiple business units. For the last 10 years, he has focused on AM devices as an SME for Zimmer Biomet. Our panelists are Alexander Henry, Business Development Manager Medical for Additive Fives. Alex has helped spine and orthopedic innovators unlock the clinical and commercial potential of additive manufacturing since 2017. He currently focuses on accelerating large-scale commercial adoption of advanced AM technologies. Jesse Unger is an R&D engineering leader with over a decade of experience in the medical device industry. He has led engineering teams at Nuvasive, Surgiline, and now ATEC Spine. He specializes in titanium additive manufacturing, having architected the Modulus and Identity 2 interbody systems. Theo Argio serves as Chief Operating Officer at Brinter, a medtech platform company developing the first ever series of 3D bioprinted biosynthetic implants. His role spans operating leadership, regulatory execution, and commercialization planning. Theo brings 20 plus years of experience leading growth, transformation, and large-scale execution across global enterprises and venture-backed companies. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you, appreciate it. Welcome, thanks all for coming. OMTech, thank you for the invitation. This is a great show, it's fun to see the progression and the value. A lot of new faces and as well as old faces. I'm excited about the panel this morning, or this afternoon. I think it'll really be good. I think back to like 2018-19 time period where anyone with a shiny printer or anything related to AM could get VC funding and get a business started. It's kind of funny now that we're kind of in this steady adoption on that hype cycles spot. We've got a lot more just like real world problems. How do you implement? So I think we'll have some good perspective. But it is interesting. It's like AI is kind of like where we were back in 18. And so we've got different challenges as we mature. But I think those are good things. I'm glad that we're getting to the point of more of a steady on-ramp of different technologies. The downside is it's not quite as easy to get funding, though. And so some of our challenges are maybe a little bit less glamorous, but there's still a lot of value for additive that I think hasn't penetrated yet. So hopefully we'll get into some of that. We've got a mix of questions from pain points to opportunities to future-looking questions as well. And I think we've got really good panelist perspectives to add to that. So jumping straight in then, from your perspective, we'll just start with Alex and go down the row. What's one of the biggest untapped opportunities in AM that our industry is slow pedaling on right now?
That's a great question, Trey. When I look at the industry and what's been happening over the last decade, I see huge success within the spine space. The work that Jesse did really transformed what was possible, and that was only made possible through additive manufacturing and really coming up with cages that were able to have a more osteomodulistic strategy to match patient anatomy. And when I look at the market today, the largest opportunities undoubtedly is large joint and extremity. Those opportunities have much more anatomical variation, the range of motion requirements for those constructs. They're perfectly suited for additive manufacturing. And the OEMs that are pursuing those solutions, they're really blazing the trail for what will eventually turn into a real-world production PSI pathway. And that's gonna blow the doors off of what we saw with spine because the parts are larger, the scale of those parts is also larger. The justification for additive and how it can be leveraged will take it to a whole new level.
Great, my turn. When I think of the biggest opportunity in the additive space, all my experience is in the spine space professionally here. So, and the big focuses I've had throughout my career are focusing on translating clinical requirements into design requirements and then being able to operate within the design for additive space. So when I think of clinical requirements, as Alex mentioned, we're looking at things like matching the stiffness of bone so that we got proper bone integration. We also have micropores on the end plate, so you get that ingrowth and on-growth. We also think of things like implant placement, where we're looking at radiographic markings we can put on the implant, et cetera. And often those clinical requirements, and therefore the design, can be in conflict with the design for additive manufacturing, how you need to support the parts, et cetera. So one of the big things I'm looking forward to is to see continued automation and kind of pushing the boundaries, not only on the software side, but also on the machine side, where it can make us easier to create these implant designs. And not only does that help with standard off-the-shelf implants, but that's also going to help with patient-matched implants long-term. So that's probably the biggest opportunity that I see.
I think the biggest opportunity right now in the market is a sort of a paradigm shift from permanent to regenerative. We're a 3D bioprinting company, so obviously that's our point of view. But there's most of the conversation in the industry has been around metal or PEEK or titanium, which are great products and great innovation to come. But the challenge is it's permanent, and body doesn't really need permanent. Body needs regenerative. Being able to offer a scaffold that helps the body to regenerate the tissue and then get out of there, get out of the system, let the body heals itself. So I think that's the big frontier for us, at least for the next 10 years. I think the reason why it's been slow, it's because it's the manufacturing paradigm is totally different. You're not just machining things. There's biocompatibility, degradation to be thought of. The regulatory pathway is different. Basically, the whole mental model of what a implant device is different. So I think that's the big opportunity. And with additive manufacturing, we're able to bring cost efficiencies that really can shift the market. Not just from a technical perspective of offering a better load sharing, better strength features, or regeneration. It's shifting perception of what an implant could be. And I think that's the big opportunity in the market in the next 10 years.
I think you all hit on different aspects that are all useful. Feel free to jump back and forth and agree or add other perspective as we go. I think one of the ways I've thought about it too is that this is a fun space. Additive is kind of complex, but it is a Venn diagram often of overlap in design, material science, and process issues. And if you don't understand that, it'll be to your harm. If you do, you can really leverage that for additional value. So that's the challenge, is not just treat it like a CNC machine swap, but really what is the material implication, the design implication, the actual inputs and the needs clinically.
Yeah, that's a great point. And when you look at what additive enables, and if you really understand how the technology can be used to make products, again, another perfect example is what Jesse did. You're not trying to duplicate what's on the market today that is being machined. You're actually using the technology to make an entirely new solution. And that's what's really pushing the envelope of what's possible and making better patient outcomes and more manufacturable products.
Yeah, and I can totally also see a world where there's a hybrid between the bio and the metal, like as partnerships are kind of forged and the bioprinting becomes more sort of established manufacturing capability. So I see there's a lot of potential depending on just understanding your manufacturing realities and the details of it.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges that I've seen over time in the additive space is, when we're creating these additively manufactured implants, we're creating the material from scratch, and we're having to essentially make our own material asserts, right? So I often think of it as kind of like an iceberg. The implant, the final device that actually we place in the patient, that's the tip of the iceberg. But below it, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into that, right? You first need to generate a process validation. Now, in order to have a process validation, you need to know your critical process parameters. So in additive, you're looking at laser power, build plate location. For us, we flex like beam diameter and different things, as well as heat treat. And then before you even get into that, to understand your critical process parameters, you need to look at things like performing DOEs. And then, heck, how do you know what to put into a DOE? Well, before that, you need to run pilot studies. So just in my experience in the industry here, it really pays to partner with people that understand those various aspects and really understand their processing technology. And that can lead to the most safe and effective devices that we can possibly make. But it does take a tremendous amount of work, as well as understanding the machines, the processes, and creating your own acceptance criteria, et cetera, build process monitors in order to get to an end state.
On that question, I think
Yeah.
that's a great segue to our next topic.
Yeah.
Poll the audience real quick. Who has been intimately a part of an FDA submission with an additively manufactured product? That's a pretty decent number. Keep your hands up if you've struggled to validate it the same way as a traditional process. I didn't see a lot of hands that go down. So for those about half the audience who haven't been a part of that, additive is being treated a little differently than a traditional manufacturing process, and that we're working out some kinks, I think, as an industry. As long as I've got people being polled, how many people are on a vendor supplier side? Raise your hands. And how many people are on an OEM side? And how many people would not say they fit in either of those categories? Okay, so it's a pretty good mix, but I'd say that most people, just by a nudge, are probably the OEM side, so more on the design challenge, design history, file ownership. So, Jesse, taking that and expanding it a little bit more, what does the audience not see or appreciate about what it actually takes to go from a promising AM design to a validated, production-ready, and regulatory body approved implant?
Right. No, and that's a great question, and that's kind of how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? So it all starts with we need to interpret the FDA guidance documents. Whether you leverage internal knowledge or external knowledge, folks can also reach out to various consultants that are experts in the space. But it does really start with figuring out a design that's compelling, that fulfills your clinical requirements. Everything that I've seen in the industry always starts with that. We need to come up with a design that, at least in my mind, the form kind of follows the function. So you can create a device that looks like it wants to integrate with bone and then back it up with all of the mechanical and performance data that you need. And then from there, it does start falling into that cascade where you need robust controls with your process validations. You truly need to understand how these printers work. And I've been fortunate over time to work with a bunch of folks in the audience here that truly do understand the additive process and help make these designs a reality. But I truly do think of it as kind of an iceberg, and unless you've gone through it and like understand the full spectrum of what needs to be accomplished in terms of kind of making your own material cert to get to your final device, it's tough to kind of comprehend the totality of that.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. I feel like the design part is, I won't say easy, but the easier part of it is get the design. It's 90%, at least for bioprinting, is can you actually produce it? Can you make it repeatable, quality, and how does that whole validation stack up? It's anything from your material selection to your manufacturing and printability to animal studies. We're on a 510K path, so there's a predicate, there is a process and framework. However, the animal studies take a year, and we need that data set to build the case. All the while, we're trying to figure out the scaling and manufacturing of things. So I think like the design is usually the coolest part of it, but you can't really bring value to the market and to patients unless you make it happen. Unfortunately, sometimes it's like we get so mesmerized by the technology and the design, and then we kind of nerd out on that, and we forget that, there's a bunch of work that needs to be done, and some of the companies then spent a decade on figuring it out how to make it happen. But especially if you set out your device on a QMS, like the path is figured out from the beginning, so that when you get that design locked, that's when you can actually start scaling it and get to the market in time.
I really like the iceberg analogy. I think that makes a lot of sense. What so many people see is the product at the end of the day, and that's valuable. But all of that regulatory burden, that entire lift, there's so much to be said about that. And one thing I'd like to add is organizations that really have a strong understanding of their process and are able to develop some type of document that really lists out all of the measurable, performance-driven milestones and map that out. And if you can do that on the front end, it really helps to improve your chances of getting your 510K and launching successfully. It helps reduce analysis paralysis and creep. So there's so many things that are associated with that iceberg. But the more that you have a standardized system in which you can have these targets that are definitive on the front end, it keeps everybody aligned from C-suite, engineering, procurement, everybody's on that same channel. And then once the product reaches all of those performance parameters, then it's really easy to see justification to freeze the design and go for submission. And I've seen several teams that have done that really well. I've seen other teams that'll just stay in this state of analysis paralysis. And even if you have a good design intent, you can still, die on the vine. And I've seen that happen more often than not as well.
This is the world of pain that I mostly live in, unfortunately, in large OEM and different teams wanting to launch products quickly. And on the one hand, I can paint a picture to say, well, there's nothing to see here. We don't have failures in the field that are any more than any other traditionally manufactured material. And on the other hand, I can say, well, this is the single most painful process that we're trying to get through the agency right now. And the differences between 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and now is kind of wildly different. You just take the AM guidance document and think you're going to be good. If you've validated a traditional process, you'll probably come up for some rude awakening and surprises in your submission for what you're asked in terms of how they're interpreting that. And I think ultimately it comes down to confidence in your output, and your output is a fatigue requirement. And right now our inputs are vast and our controls are in static properties. So we could go on for a while as to how we've tackled that as individual companies, but until we get to the point where we can just do like a CNC machine swap between different feedstocks and powder and different machines on the actual print side, we're probably going to be struggling with this point. And that comes with maturity and the confidence in the technology. So I think more that we work together, the better it'll be for all of us on this front. But it is a significant challenge, I think, still to enable those designs to get out to market faster. All right, I'm going to keep on pushing through a little bit. What's your opinion? We've got a mix here of people in terms of how much they verticalize and how much they own in the value chain stack. What's your thoughts of how much of that should be kept in one spot and you should own versus how much should you partner? Like everything from owning the machine and the manufacturing to owning the design or outsourcing the...
Yeah. I could kick off on this one. From what I've seen, it depends. So maybe that's kind of a cop-out answer, but in previous lives at NuVasive, we initially relied on contract manufacturers, and then over time, as the organization grew, and I think less focus perhaps was on growth in terms of revenue, more focus then became to kind of margins. And so I think the organization looked at verticalizing as a way to capture some of those and improve margins. So as companies kind of scale and perhaps their growth slows, having more control over your supply chain and being able to capture some of those margins in order to continue to show profitability, at least in my experience, that's what I've seen as kind of the inflection point between going with contract manufacturing versus insourcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. It's not so much whether one pathway, insourcing or outsourcing, is right or wrong. It's really understanding the DNA of your company and your organization, what assets you have, where you are in your development cycle as an organization. Generally speaking, when I look at more startups and mid-sized companies, they tend to leverage contract manufacturers. It makes a lot of sense. It reduces their capital exposure. It enables them to leverage the expertise of the partners that they work with. But then as revenues grow, experience within the organization continues to get better, then you look at some of the top tier companies like ZB, and you have all of these internal resources. So now you can take advantage of a more in-sourced model that gives you more control of your supply chain, more control of your margins, more control of the direction that you want to take your portfolio.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. We're a pre-revenue startup, so we're on the pathway to our first product. So we've done both. And the learning there is it's totally stage dependent. To your point in the beginning, early stages, you don't have the capital, you don't have the resources, you don't have the people, you try to protect the science, and then you partner with the best possible solutions you have. And for us, it's a little bit different because we build our own printers. So the printer itself is an IP, the manufacturing of it, the material work that we've done, and then the implant designs. But other than that, we are always making make or buy decisions. And I think as we get commercial, as the volumes rise, then we can have these business conversations on like what might make sense to capture. And it might be in that world. I've seen so much like good partnership to be formed. So it's not always even the short-sightedness of like, let's capture this revenue and this profitability here. It might in the long term actually not make sense either. So it just depends on, to your point, it's like how you position yourself in the market, what's the stage you're in. And I think that the worst thing you can be is in between. You're not verticalizing and you're not outsourcing efficiently. You're kind of halfway in. And we've always thought about the rule of thumb is like, unless we know every single point that goes into our value chain, we can't verticalize it. Like that's the rule of thumb, at least for us, is like, unless we know precisely what's in that value chain, it makes no sense for us to go there, given the resources we have.
I think it's a great perspective. It's not a simple answer, and you need to understand the consequences of what you're putting and releasing to other people to do versus bringing it in-house, and really understanding the value that the product and that launch and the timeline is giving you. Okay, jumping to personalization. Additive and personalization often kind of go hand in hand, and a lot of people actually assume that as large OEM, we're making custom implants at a much larger scale than we actually are. There actually is a place for that, and we do a lot of custom implants. But most people are actually well served by a standard line implant that, like Stryker was talking about in the keynote, is better positioned and better implanted with better procedures. That's probably the low-hanging fruit. But in terms of on-demand personalization and the future of additive, in your perspective, what are the biggest hurdles preventing us from delivering patient-specific implants here in the U.S. at speed and at scale?
I mean, we can already do geometric personalization. I don't think the personalization itself is the issue. It's everything around it seems to be the thing that holds back. From regulatory perspective is you have these frameworks that are mostly suited for standardized mass manufactured devices. And 510K says that my device is equivalent to a predicate. But the problem is, like, if everything is different, what's your predicate? So we run into these sort of challenges, and I think FDA is doing a good job of like pushing the envelope. There was I think it was a 3D knee implant that was authorized like 2024. So they're pushing the regulatory path forward, and hopefully we'll get more sort of leeway there. The other thing I think it's causing a friction is the reimbursement. So, the codes are pretty much flat rated, don't really take into consideration of the additive cost of personalization. So there's probably a lot of work to be done there. And especially in the bioprinting section of things. So as said, geometric personalization, we can deliver that. But when it comes to the next phase of it, which is biological personalization, that's a 2035 vision, or even alternatively longer. But that requires a totally different value chain for materials, the manufacturing, regulatory. So it just changes the nature of the whole personalization conversation. So the geometric, sure, but when you go into biologics, that's a whole nother conversation to be had.
I agree. Yeah, additive manufacturing, it's a key. It is the key that enables a level of personalization that everyone has imagined, but you don't see it executed at scale. And there's a number of reasons for that. There's the regulatory lift. Another part of it is the actual production demand. And is there a platform that enables that? So you're developing that in-house.
Yeah.
When you look at the legacy AM platforms that are available, those platforms were perfect for spine based off of the size of those implants. But when you're looking at personalization on a larger scale for large joint and extremity, there really hasn't been a platform that could deliver a strong business case until recently. So now there is a platform that's able to deliver the type of throughput for large joint and extremity, and that's going to open up a whole new level of what's possible. And I'm really excited to see where that takes us.
Yeah, I haven't worked on any commercial products that are patient matched myself. But I think the future with it's tremendous. What we think about at ATEC and what we kind of drilled into us is proceduralization and clinical outcomes. So when I think of patient match, certainly in spine, it's a bit of a catch-22 in that you're doing something new. And you need to demonstrate the clinical efficacy of something in order to truly get buy-in. So you need to make the implant in order to get to the clinical evaluation so you can prove the effectiveness, and then ultimately so that you can kind of also be reimbursed appropriately, because that's a huge part of everything. The more I understand about the industry, the more I realize that insurance is they're everyone's dad with all this. So we're all just kind of beholden to them. So I think those are two critical factors, and then it's just being able to get to surgery is going from scan to surgery as quick as possible. So that's another hurdle. But it all starts with patient planning and making sure you're making the right geometric construct. So getting an appropriate patient scan, being able to automate the process. You'd be surprised in spine for the amount of surgeons that don't really do any planning. So one of the hardest things that I've observed over the years is changing habit in the surgeon community. And so the more we can automate the process, the more we can make it easy for them to deliver the implants and make the best patient outcome possible. That's when I think we'll really start getting more traction, and folks like the Carlsmeds of the world and even Globus now, Restore 3D, they're all doing all the patient implants, matched implants now. So I'm really excited to see where that takes the industry.
Yeah, it's definitely a buzzword. With Carlsmed, you see organizations now that are really blazing that trail on the regulatory side. So as that becomes more established, I think we're going to have some points to focus on that'll help pave that pathway, enable these products to release faster and really build out that PSI pathway in a way that can really transform healthcare.
I think a lot of great points. I think people also probably don't appreciate how hard it is to change manufacturing workflows and having a full digital thread with a regulated industry. It's not like you can just say, all right, well, I'm going to make everything custom per person and have that be efficient. But ultimately, I really think it comes down to value. A lot of you guys are talking about value. And if you can demonstrate value and the payer wants to pay for that value, that's what's going to drive significant changes in how we're delivering care. Okay, I want to leave some time for Q&A. I'm sure you guys have a lot of good thoughts and questions. But before we do that, it's 2036, 10 years from now. We're in the 30th anniversary now for OMTech. What has AM made possible in orthopedics that would surprise this room today? Let's start with you, Alex, and go down the road.
Cool. That's a great question. When I think about what's going to be possible in the next 10 to 15 years, I imagine something more along the lines of a hybrid construct in which you have, a 3D printed metal, either Ti-64, cobalt chrome, possibly other material. But if I had to bet, I'd say Ti-64 or cobalt chrome. And taking that type of construct and blending it, encapsulating it, if you will, with some type of bioprinted envelope. And that's going to help promote fixation, reduce infection rates, soft tissue repair. So something more along those lines. And we've seen that. I'm not making it up. If you look at Terminator, we've all seen the movie, but that same type of science fiction, but with today's technology and the people in this room, these technologies, I believe, are going to become possible over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, when I think about 10 years from now, I think I first think where we were 10 years ago. And so a lot of these laser powder bed fusion printers were all coming out, and there was limited design software to use them. So the printers were kind of ahead of the software. And in the time since then, the software has evolved tremendously to help with not only designs, but printability, et cetera. And now we're at a point, I think, looking forward where, look, in the medical device industry, it's inherently iterative. Everyone likes using the word of innovation, but virtually every company in the space, not every company, a lot of the companies in the space exist within the 510K pathway, which is based on predicates, which is iterative. So we do our best to innovate within that space, but how I kind of see things shaken out, especially with the advances in additive, is I do think the patient match kind of implants, certainly in spine, are going to take a foothold, and I think that'll be a subset and aspect of the business. I also think there's going to continue to exist all the off-the-shelf implants. So all the major OEMs, from what I can tell, are chasing patient planning, which is what all these kind of roll up into. But heck, 10 years ago at NuVasive, we were talking about global alignment, and we're still working towards that dream. So I like to think in 10 years we're going to be much more astute. We're going to leverage automation in the software side of things, being able to take patient scans, and then work towards determining, when you go through the workflow of what implants, how to place them, that you're going to have one side that goes off the shelf when appropriate, where you can achieve the appropriate patient outcome, and then another side that's going to go to patient matched. And then beyond that, I'm excited to what Theo's working on, because I have a tissue engineering background as well. So I'm hopeful in his success.
Yeah, I think in 10 years, probably the bioprinted tissue implants are the norm. Rotator cuff, tendon management, tendon repairs, most of those will be bioprinted implants, I would assume. And it's not because it's like the most coolest technology, it's just it's the sense of cost efficiency. And that will make the payers kind of pick it up, and then that allows for the surgeons to adapt, and then that's when the market shift happens. But I also think that the line between CDMOs and implant manufacturers evaporates. I don't think the OEMs, it doesn't make sense for them to develop their own bioprinting technologies from scratch. I think that might not be the smartest way to go to market if you have already pioneers in the market. I think it's going to be something like the semiconductor fab that happened. TSMC is like, the pioneers will become infrastructure, and the technology gets licensed from them. But I think the big thing, I think for 2035 would be that I think we could get a 3D bioprinted load-bearing construct in a patient where you can't really tell the difference between the original tissue and the bioprinted construct that sits there. And it's probably not a mesh or scaffold. It's a construct that, when a pathologist looks at from cross-section, it's like, can't tell the difference. And that's the sort of, I think, groundbreaking leaps we could do. Certainly not today. We're building the foundations from it. But I think sometimes the big leaps can be closer than you think, and the short ones take longer than you think. So I think 2035, we're going to be in a place where bioprinting has become everyday manufacturing capability, and we're reaping the benefits of that.
Great answers. I think the one thing I'd add, if I'm going to be bold, I think I would say hopefully we've solved the next two major failure modes from registries. Hopefully infection and loosening are gone. And we look back and go, oh, remember when we were actually trying to figure out how to do biological fixation and modulus matching and issues with infection and race to the surface? Those are already solved at this point. And so we figured out, regardless of the material, how to not have to do implant designs for revisability. I hope we don't hear that again in 10 years. Okay, I think we've got a mic that'll be going around. And if you've got a question, maybe wait till you have that in your hand, raise your hand so everyone can hear you.
Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. I have a more down-to-earth question about, we are focusing on implants, and of course it's driving additive manufacturing possibilities. What's your opinion about surgical instruments and the opportunities due to additive manufacturing?
Great question.
Oh, absolutely. Surgical instrumentation is a huge opportunity. The compensation and revenue structure behind it tends to be a barrier that I see. But as far as producing patient-matched instrumentation, it's certainly something that can be developed. It's just really that challenge of the economics behind it, who's paying for it, is there a justification for that? And really coming down to how the technology, how much more is it, how much better is it than what's available now? I've seen organizations leverage additive manufacturing on the metal side to really help accelerate the development of those instrument sets. And then usually once those solutions are frozen, they tend to go back to a more traditional manufacturing process flow. But in the future, as the economics in metal AM continue to improve, I can see a tipping point in the future. I'm not sure exactly how far out, where instrumentation becomes a much more viable pathway to go, AM versus legacy machining, which has tremendously long lead times, and there's a number of other challenges associated with that as well.
Yeah, with the instrumentation side, that's the other side of the business, and it drives a lot of the distribution economics of how all the orthopedic business models work. When we're thinking about instrumentation on our side, we're similar to what Alex just said. We're using a bunch of polymer printers. We use Stratasys J35s, I think, to create prototypes overnight. So we're which is commonplace in the industry at this point, in order to vet out our designs, get feedback, not only internally, but from our surgeon partners. So it's a big part of our development process. We aren't currently using it, at least for what I've seen on my end, too much on the actual kind of reusable instrument side. We're starting to look at things like shims. I know there's other competing technologies with that as well you can look at. But one of the biggest challenges I have seen with instrumentation over time, at least thinking about instruments from the metal additive side, is just tolerances. We hold tight tolerances all over the place on instrumentation, where we need to hold, tooth out between mating components, and that's one of the primary challenges. But yeah, it's one of those things with additive where we're always looking for the right fit for the technology, and seeing where it can be implemented in order to achieve designs and drive down cost. Great.
Yeah, for us, instrumentation, our philosophy is we're trying to be agnostic on everything, just to make sure that the adaptation is as wide as possible. So, minimal invasive surgery on rotator cuff is our conundrum what we're trying to solve right now. But having said that, what we've noticed is the delivery device actually drives the adaptation a lot. So you have to put some design mustard behind that to make sure that it's easy to implant and you don't get in the way of established procedures. So rather than coming to a point where you have to ask the surgeon to change the pattern, change the way they learn to do stuff, their craft, and their skill, we're trying to find a way to utilize not only the implant but also the delivery device, so that we just integrate easily, so that it's a little additive thing, sorry about the pun, but additive thing to your procedure, which then just makes the outcome so much better.
Thank you. Alex, you hinted at new platforms that'll make the economics of printing implants different. Can you expand on that? Are we talking bigger build plates, more lasers? What's the technology coming that's going to revolutionize this?
Both of those points. There's platforms. There's one platform in particular that's available now that is really enabling large joint extremity to take advantage of metal additive manufacturing. I don't want to plug my business, the business that I represent, but that's the platform. It's the FormUp 350. It's got a quad laser system. It's got a larger build plate, and these elements help dramatically improve the throughput. And because the size of large joint extremity products are larger than spine products, the economics is finally in place now. And the driving force, in opposed to legacy casting, it really is enabling a whole new production pathway, and the economics finally make sense.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk so far. My question is around new materials. So what do you think are the new material trends that should happen over the next 10 years? So whether it be magnesium or different alloys of what we already have.
I guess I'll jump in and say it's all about the value. So it depends on what the benefit is of that technology and what issues you're trying to address. I think we're well past just having a new flashy technology for the sake of new and flashy, and it's going to have to come back, even like the panel the other day, in terms of surgeon perspective of, okay, well, they've got a scoring sheet. What's the clinical value add? What's the actual cost of that? And is it actually effective? So safety, efficacy, and cost, I think, was their filters.
And I'll add to that. It's a lot of what I see that is restraining the introduction of new materials. It falls on the regulatory burden. So you can find OEMs that are interested in exploring, for example, nitinol. And I see that there could definitely be a business case built for coming out with machines that are able to print nitinol and come up with trauma plates and things of that nature. But really, being able to get that across the finish line, it's a huge regulatory hurdle. And when you look at other materials like titanium and now cobalt chrome, there's so much history that has to be built in order to gain the trust of the FDA as well as the surgeon community, and those take time. So even though the technology, I believe that those pathways are going to open up much faster. It's that regulatory side that is just going to take time, and convincing surgeons as well as patients that this material makes sense, because the world's changing really quickly, and even though the technology can keep up, we're still people, and how quickly is the FDA going to move? They're not a private organization. What's really incentivizing them? So they tend to move slower than most people, on the commercial side would expect.
So 44 minutes went by really fast. One last parting question. If the people in this room are to go back to work next week and do one thing differently, what should it be? Theo, you want to start us off and go the other way?
Sure. Reach out and talk to a bioprinting company. Don't sell, don't buy, don't just have a chat conversation. I think there's a maybe in this industry, like, people don't really know how far the industry in bioprinting is, and it might change some of the thinking that currently is happening. So talk to your friendly neighborhood bioprinting company.
I like it. Jesse?
Yeah, I'll give a plug to the conference. I mean, this conference has been a great opportunity to reach out to a bunch of current and also new contacts that you made. So following up on those and seeing where you can work together to innovate for the next products.
I would say analyze your NPI pipelines, next generation pipelines, and really look for opportunities that you think can really bring to market truly disruptive products, and then build that milestone roadmap that I talked about earlier, and see if you can answer some of those questions on the front end, and then share that internally, share that with your colleagues at a show like this. And even though we're in an environment currently where the capital is a little bit tighter than it was in the past, it's still worth exploring and seeing what's possible, because a lot of these technologies are just around the corner, but it's not going to happen organically. We're relying on people like you to actually, look internally and push those initiatives and getting them across the finish line.
I would say try to fight for reality. Let's work on the implants and designs that we want in our bodies, because we're probably going to need them. So try to push into the opportunities of AM. So with that, thanks all. Appreciate your
Cool.
attendance.